View from the Bus, written by Jeffrey Ebright, performed by Craig Groshek. Every few years, my family moved to a new town. We had to. Dad's job made us. We'd spent a couple years in Marysville, California, a couple in Odenton, Maryland, and a couple in Dubuque, Iowa. I lived in 5 different cities before I was ready for the 7th grade. Now we were in Dayton, Ohio. You really get used to the Air Force moving you around from place to place. Dad made it seem like an adventure. My older sister, Karen, hated it because she always left behind her best friend. I guess her best friends didn't know about the internet. But she was right. It was tough to make new friends in a new place. Mom made sure the move to Dayton would be done before the school year started so we could get to know the neighborhood and maybe make some new friends. It was always harder to make friends when you just appear in the middle of a school year. And Mom was right, too. That summer, I found a bunch of kids my age in the neighborhood. They were pretty much like me, Air Force brats from someplace else, just looking for other kids with the same interests. There was Tommy Reynolds, super jock and natural leader of our group. Second in command was Richie Stevens. Kenny Downs was the joker of the gang, and I was, well, I don't know what I was. I guess I was 12 and that was all I needed to be. And we had an awesome summer. On the first day of school, Karen refused to give me a ride. She explained that I was in middle school and she couldn't be seen with a middle school kid, even if it was her brother, because she was now in high school, so I had no choice but to take the bus. I didn't mind the big yellow bus. In some of the places where I'd lived, I'd have to walk to school. That's why Dubuque really sucked for me. I mean, I'm not an athlete, but I'm no blob on the couch either. Why get all sweaty in the summer and frozen in the winter walking to school? Besides, riding the bus was good enough for my friends, so it was good enough for me. It didn't hurt that the school system had house-to-house pickups either. Our time on the bus was spent catching up with whatever happened the night before and figuring out what we were going to do that day. Sometimes we had mischief on our minds, but mostly we wanted to have a plan of attack for lunch and study hall. My job, since I was one of the first kids on the route, was saving seats for Tommy, Richie, and Kenny. One day in October, before Halloween but after the leaves on the trees had turned colors, the bus rolled up to Tommy's house to start a new week. The big brake screeched like a cat caught in a fence gap and puffed fumes from its twin tailpipes. We waited a couple seconds before the driver tapped the horn. I wiped the fogged-up bus window to see what was going on. Tommy's door opened a couple seconds later, but it wasn't Tommy coming to meet the bus. In the semi-frosted window of the storm door stood his mom. Her blue robe was as messy as her hair, and she looked really pale. The expression on her face was blank. Her eyes looked hollow like a doll's. She waved a floppy hand to the bus to keep going. "Tommy sick or something?" Rich asked. "I don't know," I said. "I thought I saw, nothing." "Probably got his period." Kenny laughed. "You're safe this month, Richie boy." "You're a dick." Rich punched Kenny in the arm. I watched Tommy's house as the bus lurched into gear and slowly pulled away. I ignored Kenny and Rich insulting each other and kept staring at Tommy's house. I don't know if it was because my breath was fogging up the bus window, but it was as if Tommy's mom was there one minute and gone the next. Tommy's front door closed with a quick, hard slam as we sped off to the next pickup. We all wondered what was going on with Tommy when we got to school. We knew his family had planned a weekend trip up to the Lake Erie Fear Fest. We put all Tommy thoughts on hold when the first bell rang. We'd discuss it later at lunch. Unfortunately, we came up with nothing over the day's lunch of beef and noodles. Rich had gotten the most recent text from Tommy on Saturday morning. Tommy mentioned something about getting a late start because his dad had to talk to the contractor about finishing the porch while they were upstate. The most frustrating part was that the principal had a ban on bringing cell phones to school, so we'd just have to wait until we got home. I didn't even have my coat off before I grabbed my phone from the charger and dialed Tommy's number. It rang 3 times and went to voicemail. I texted him too, but got nothing back. I texted Kenny and Rich, but they had nothing to report. I took the phone up to my room and changed into a pair of sweats. Since Dad had rules about getting on the internet before dinner and homework, I quickly scarfed down my food, showed him my finished homework, and excused myself. By the time I got online, Kenny and Rich were already chatting about Tommy. They had nothing new. I mentioned how creepy his mom looked, and Rich told me that's the face she always had, especially when Kenny would come around. We reassured each other that we'd see Tommy bright and early on the bus tomorrow, and gamed until my computer curfew kicked in. I almost forgot to put my phone back on the charger. Another one of Dad's rules. So I went downstairs, plugged it into the charger, and went up to bed. Morning came too early. I rolled out of bed and turned off my annoying alarm clock. I could feel the chill outside my window, so I slipped into my school clothes and headed downstairs. As usual, Mom had breakfast ready. My sister and I were mostly civil at the breakfast table to save Mom's last nerve before we went off to school. I put on my coat and waited in the cold October morning for my ride to school. Kenny dropped into the seat in front of me as the bus rumbled to the next stop. A few minutes later, we rolled up to Richie's house. No Richie. The bus doors opened with a rush of cool air as the driver looked closer. The kids on the bus began complaining as me and Kenny wiped our fogging windows. A pale hand slipped between the curtain of the window next to Richie's door and waved the bus on. WTF, Kenny said. He's sick too? I said. Tommy probably gave him whatever he had, said Kenny, as the bus doors creaked shut. What are you talking about? Did you get a text from Tommy? I shook my head. Rich said Tommy texted him last night. He did? Yeah, you already logged off. He said Tommy was on his way over to his house. Did he text you too? Nope, Kenny shrugged. But I'm not Tommy's butt buddy. How about you? I forgot to check my phone before I left the house this morning. I wouldn't worry about it. They're probably over there smoking each other's poles. Kenny nudged me with an elbow. Yeah, I guess. We didn't say much about Tommy or Richie that day. But I knew we were both thinking about them. I don't think we wanted to talk about our fearless leader or his sidekick being laid up in a bed puking sick. Or worse. I mean, they were jocks. If some bug put them out of action for 4 days, we certainly didn't want to catch it. So the two of us didn't bring it up during lunch or on our bus ride home. Tommy and Richie would text us. I checked my phone. No messages or voicemails. I can't say why, but I had a bad feeling about all of this. No Tommy, no Richie, no information. Something just didn't smell right. After dinner, Dad allowed us to watch some TV with him while we finished up our homework. His choice was always the local 6 o'clock news and a couple reruns of some sitcom that was funny when he was younger. I was on the last algebra problem from Miss Clayton's class when I snapped to attention. On the TV, a reporter stood in front of yellow police tape and a couple of police cars.
Behind me is where a family became the victims of a grisly multiple homicide. Police received a call from neighbors early this morning about a smell coming from the home of Roger Reynolds. When police arrived on scene, they entered the home only to discover the family of 5 had been murdered,
offered the well-dressed reporter. The news showed an interview. The banner under the man stated he was Homicide Detective John Pickering, Dayton PD.
As this is an ongoing investigation, we can't say too much. However, we can confirm Colonel Reynolds and his family are deceased.
He had a look of total frustration as he finished with,
It's just a mess in there, that's all I can say.
Detective Pickering turned away from the camera. The news cut back to the reporter who was live on the scene.
Colonel Reynolds' family included his wife and 3 children.
They showed a photo as they read each name.
Emily, Sarah, and Thomas. Sources inside the Dayton Police Department told Channel 7 News the family had been dead for some time before the horrific discovery of the bodies this morning. The medical examiner estimates the family was brutally murdered either Saturday or Sunday. In an exclusive to Channel 7, we have learned the family members suffered stab wounds and were possibly drained of their blood.
No. I whispered to no one as the reporter buzzed on. Isn't that one of your school buddies, Sport? Dad asked. Yes. I couldn't offer anything else. My mind was spinning. Sport, are you okay? I jumped up from the table and grabbed my phone. I gotta call Kenny, I said as I hurried up the stairs. I expected Dad to protest, but I think he felt my urgency. Before Kenny had a chance to say hello, I asked, Did you just see the news? I don't watch that crap. Quick, get online and check the Channel 7 website, I told him as I surfed over to the page. Holy shit, was all Kenny could manage. What do we do? What do you mean, what do we do? We know Tommy texted Richie on Monday. And if they were killed over the weekend, then Kenny cut me off. Tommy never sent that text. Exactly. So what do we do? I don't know. I could almost hear the wheels spinning in Kenny's brain. Have you talked to Richie yet? No, have you? No. We need to get him in on this too. I'll call him and send a tweet. You text him and IM him on Facebook. Got it. Kenny sounded lost. But what if Richie doesn't get back to us? I had no answer. A sinking feeling grabbed my stomach. We'll think of something. That sinking feeling didn't go away as I called and tweeted Richie. There was no response. I left my phone next to the computer and sent him an email, too. Nothing. I wanted to take the phone with me to bed, but I knew Dad would ground me for a week. I couldn't afford that right now. So I ran the phone downstairs and put it in the cradle. Sleeping was not easy that night. In the morning, I rubbed my eyes open and got myself together for school. I did make sure to check my phone to see if I had any messages. 0. So I zipped up my coat and stepped outside to wait for the bus. The bus stopped at Kenny's house. Nobody came out. The driver honked. Still no Kenny. The bus driver shrugged and put the bus in gear. This was repeated at Richie's house. I felt queasy as panicked thoughts raced through my mind. As the bus rumbled past Tommy's house, a chill ran through my body looking at the big yellow X of police tape across Tommy's door. I felt as empty as the seats I'd saved for my missing friends. At school, a few people asked me where Richie and Kenny were. I had no answer. Principal Watkins stopped me in the hall to let me know grief counselors were in the school. He told me he knew Tommy was a friend and the counselors were there if I needed them. I thanked him and went off to my next class. I didn't have any grief to talk about. All I had was a big ball of fear knotting in my gut. When I got home, I texted Richie and Kenny. Once again, I received no answer. Dad hadn't gotten home yet, so I said hello to Mom and I headed for my room. I fired up my computer to check and see if anybody had IM'd or emailed. No emails, no tweets. I did see the red notification on the messages icon in Facebook. I clicked on it and there was a message from Kenny at 10:34 last night. Now, he's getting online against the rules of dinner/homework/internet, but doesn't mention that he knows he's breaking the rules because this is now a crisis. Hey, curfew boy. Richie boy texted me. He's coming over tonight so we can strategize. Don't you wish you could be here? Oh, shit, was all I could think. I immediately headed downstairs. I had an overwhelming urge to get to Kenny's house as soon as possible, but I had to get past Mom first. Keeping as calm as possible, I lied to my mom that I needed to go over to Kenny's house because he had something I needed to finish my homework. Since Kenny's house was only 2 blocks away, I told her I'd be back in time for dinner. She was busy watching her soap opera and waved me away. Then I heard the TV.
We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming for a special bulletin from the Channel 2 news team. Here's Brian Panade.
I continued putting on my coat as I moved to see the TV screen.
In as many days, our city has experienced a second gruesome set of murders. We go to Marcus Mills, who is live on the scene.
In the few seconds they took to switch from the studio to the location, I immediately recognized the house being swarmed by police officers. It was Richie's.
Thanks, Brian. I'm standing in front of a house on Sycamore Avenue that has become a terrifying crime scene.
The report went to a pre-recorded segment. As the reporter's voice talked over the segment, the footage showed 2 men with coroner's office on the back of their jackets, wheeling out a stretcher with a body bag on it.
Early this morning, police responded to a call from Vic Aykroyd, a concerned neighbor who had stopped off at this house to borrow a garden tool. He had no idea what he would find.
The TV showed the neighbor.
Yeah, I stopped over about 9 to see if Earl would let me use his hedge trimmer. I wanted to get one more clear cut before we get our first snow. Anyway, I knocked on the door, but nobody answered. So I went back to that old cellar door in the back. That's where he keeps his tools and such. And it wasn't locked. I didn't think he'd mind, so I went into the basement. I found Earl and Enid and Tammy and Rich all trussed up to the floor, choice pale as ghosts. And there was this old washtub filled with blood sitting in the middle of the room. Really disturbing.
Back to the reporter and more morning footage.
The victims, 45-year-old Earl Williams, 40-year-old Enid Stevens, and their 2 children, Tammy, age 9, and Richard, age 13, were all pronounced dead on the scene by the medical examiner. No further details have been offered by Dayton police. Some are speculating these murders may be related. If true, Dayton might have joined the ranks of other cities with a serial killer living in their midst. We spoke to several...
I didn't want to hear the rest. I was out the door in a flash. I ran as fast as I could to Kenny's house, hoping, praying I'd find him home and mocking me for being all sweaty and out of breath. I made better time hopping a few fences and cutting through a few yards. I ended up jumping into Kenny's backyard. That's when I saw light creeping out from the basement window. In all the time I'd known Kenny, we'd never gone into the basement. He told me it was filled with so many boxes of junk and other crap that it was hard to move around down there. Like the best wargamers, I slowly approached the window. I made sure to step lightly and to make as little noise as possible. It seemed like an eternity before I crouched down and looked into the window. Actually, if it wouldn't have been for a small chunk of glass missing from the window, I would never have been able to see anything, because all the basement windows had been covered with gray spray paint from the inside. I guess it was something his dad had done to keep prowlers from casing the place. I wiped away the spiderwebs from the paint and lightly pressed my eye up to the opening. I really don't want to describe what I saw through that half-inch wide hole in the glass, but the details have been burned into my mind. For years, what I saw in Kenny's basement haunted my dreams. Sometimes I'd wake up screaming, cold sweat soaking into my sheets. The first thing I noticed was the work lights on a stand off to the side, illuminating the entire basement in a harsh light. Not that a well-lit room meant anything, as sagging cardboard boxes blocked my view of most of the basement. But I could see Kenny, and he was looking very pale. My friend lay on a ratty weightlifting bench, but it was not because he wanted to lift weights. Kenny was tied to the bench by a bunch of bungee cords, and he'd been gagged. That's when I saw the small, dark red tube running from his arm to the big tin bucket on the floor. Oh, the tube wasn't red, it was the blood running through the tube. Suddenly Kenny's drooping eyes snapped open. He was staring at something past his feet that I couldn't see from my window crack. Then a thick shadow stretched across Kenny. It was nothing supernatural. It was the kind a person would cast if they stepped in front of a powerful work light. But the way it slowly crossed my friend's helpless body creeped me out. Kenny started to struggle furiously and scream through the gag, but I could tell he was too weak to put up a decent fight. He couldn't break free even if he wasn't being drained of his blood.
Don't be like that, Kenny.
The voice was low and sounded more like somebody crumpling thick paper.
It's impolite.
The shadow and voice finally appeared in my limited view. It was definitely a man. Maybe 6 feet tall and stocky. He wore dark pants with a dark long-sleeve shirt. Over that he had a thick rubber butcher's apron and thick rubber gloves. I couldn't see his face because of the black ski mask and circular mirrored sunglasses he wore. He walked over to Kenny like he had all day and placed a gloved finger to his gagged lips. The man looked in the bucket. He stroked Kenny's hair and didn't speak for what felt like minutes.
In no time you fall asleep and wake up with your parents in heaven. That is my gift to you.
Kenny continued to yell into his gag as his tears flowed. I'm sure the man had a smile under his mask as he continued stroking Kenny's hair. It was at that moment I cursed not bringing my phone with me. Even though Kenny was my friend, it made no sense to try to rescue him. I had to get out of there and get to a phone, but I was glued to the spot.
You'll see I'm right, Kenny,
the man continued.
If you don't believe me, why don't you ask your little friend?
The man slowly turned his head in my direction and stared at the spray-painted window I was peeking through. His mirrored glasses caught the light of the work lamps and seemed to focus the rays in the little spotlights that put spots in my peeking eye. I dared not move because movement would give me away. It was then he waved a gloved hand at me. I don't think I even touched the ground as I flew through yards and over fences to get back to the safety of my home. I burst through the door like a wild animal and proceeded to babble to my parents. I guess they understood enough of what I was saying that they immediately called the police. The police showed up at my house in minutes. I calmed down enough to tell them the story. They immediately sent cruisers over to Kenny's house, but they were too late to save Kenny or his parents, or catch the killer with the mirrored glasses. The police let us know the killer had used Tommy's phone to text Richie. Then, after he killed Richie's family, he used Richie's phone to text Kenny. Each time he sent a short text. I'm coming over. However, they only shared this information when I received the same text 2 days later from Kenny's cell. Dad wasted no time getting us the hell out of Ohio. He got an emergency reassignment to Shriver Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which was the farthest assignment Dad could manage on such short notice. The Dayton police were not happy with the move, but my dad used more than a few colorful words to convince the cops that they were not going to stop us from moving. All of this happened 3 years ago. Although I can never forget the tragedies in Dayton, I've never spoken about it until now. It's not that the time is right or anything. I don't think telling this story to anyone will help heal the wounds. The pain goes too deep. There's only one way I'll escape the nightmares. I stole my dad's 9mm semi-automatic Glock. It's sitting next to my laptop, loaded with black Talon bullets. They're so hardcore they can rip through body armor. I shouldn't need more than one of those bad boys to get the job done. The best part is that my mom and dad are at some base function that will keep them out late. I also convinced my sister to hang out at her dorm instead of coming home. They can't be here tonight now that I must do what I must do. Will I have the courage to pull the trigger? I don't know. But I think I can. I have to. 30 minutes ago, I received a voicemail from one of my friends here in Colorado. He had gotten sick the day before and missed school. The voice on the message sounded like the crumpling of heavy paper. The message was just 3 words.
I'm coming over.